Thank you, everyone. Good morning. Very appropriate. Ali's put me by a door just in case I have to make a dash. And a tin hat's not been supplied, and I've forgotten to bring one. But it's a pleasure to be here. Hopefully what I'm going to say won't spoil people's lunch, but you never actually know. The issue about how do we restore or enhance trust in business is as old as business itself. Anyone reading Adam Smith's 1776 Wealth of Nations would see how critical he was of chartered companies and how he thought directors would misbehave. And 250 years later, those issues are yet to be resolved. There's a very simple answer if you want to restore trust in business. That is, don't engage in any antisocial practices. Behave yourself, have higher standards, have integrity, have ethics. But that seems to be elusive in many cases. Most companies strive to be responsible and ethical, but too many are simply not. Just turn on television on any day, and you will see a whole litany of abuses and malpractices. 72 people were burned to death in Grenfell fire in London. Yet I'm getting reports from house builders who oppose the installation of better insulation because it might damage their profits. It's okay, I thought human sacrifice was banished, but it is apparently alive. And the big business seems to support it. 334,000 people have died because of austerity imposed between 2012 and 2019. Low wages, low healthcare, low education, social security system not supportive. Has there ever been a government in British history which has killed so many of its own citizens? And we are expecting these governments.
And those annual life.
Hello. Maybe a place is bugged. I don't know. Okay. We have energy companies profiteering at a grand scale. We have water companies profiteering. Don't they ever think that what they're doing might reduce people's disposable income? It might increase inflation. Same companies then oppose wage rises for people, but lifting off the dividend bonus cap for bankers is okay, high executive pay is okay, shareholder returns are okay. It is a kind of a mad world. Not really surprising that people are skeptical of what the business leaders tell them. Other examples, if you were to look at in the newspapers, and as I'm in the City of London, let me just give you some city examples. City finance industry has been a serial offender, has been mis-selling financial products at an industrial scale. You can imagine in if you want to launch any medicine, somebody has to test. Is it harmful? Does nobody test any of these products to see what their consequences might be? The City of London has been busy rigging interest rates and foreign exchange rates. LIBOR scandal. Nobody really knows what the damage from that has been. And now we know what people were actually doing. There are pension abuses. I was asked by the House of Commons Work and Pensions Committee to investigate the collapse of Bernard Matthews, which was a famous poultry business, those of you who live in the UK. And what do I find? That the private equity owners deliberately gutted the business at the end. They sold the business at the end, but only the assets, not the liabilities. So we wrote to the new owner and said, why did you not buy the whole business, including the pension liability? They wrote back, and it is on the internet, the whole letter, saying the Rutland partners, who were private equity, only wanted to sell the assets so that they could get higher price, dump creditors, dump pension scheme. And then the pension regulator had to act. So again, so you look around, you find tax dodges, and we heard about some of them. I'm also a co-founder of Tax Justice Network, and we have long been concerned about the tax dodges, and indeed over the last 20 years, we have helped to popularize the issue and draw everybody's attention to this. There are illicit financial flows. London is the home of the world's dirty money. The City of London knew there's dirty money is going into the property sector. No regulator cared. And then Putin invades Russia. Suddenly there are scare quotes about oligarchs' monies. We must do something. Anyone from anywhere in the world can use any name, any address, and form a company in the UK. Absolutely no problem. It is impossible to appease the deregulatory people and then say we're going to have decent governance and confidence. So small companies don't have to file accounts at Companies House. Some do, and they don't have to have an audit. So small companies have now become fronts for dirty money. Wherever you look, there's a small company based in the UK, which is a front. It is a shell company. I've turned up companies and I've referred to the government, small companies, no employees, never ever traded, share capital, £100 trillion. And that is filed at Companies House. A director's name, Adolf Fairy Tale Hitler. Director's name, Chicken Thief. Now, why the chicken thief? Italian mafia formed a company in the UK. They carried on doing all kinds of things. At the end, they realized how useless the regulators are. So they filed everything in Italian. So the Italian director's name translated into English meant, I am chicken thief. What is your occupation? It was an Italian English translation, I'm fraudster. What is your address? Street of 40 Thieves, Alibaba, town of Alibaba in Italy. Year after year, that is filed, nobody checks. Regulators are also complicit in giving bad name to business. We have the whole statutory might of Companies House aiding fraud worldwide. Nobody seems to care. And raise this in Companies House, and ministers just shrug their shoulder. In Parliament, ministers shrug their shoulders. Now they said they are bringing another corporate crime bill. When you read it, they want to outsource the verification of third parties' documents to somewhere else. You say, so you've got no capacity to deal with it. The whole thing is kind of crazy. Companies have, too many companies cook the books. Phone hacking scandal is another example of corporations misbehaving. Diesel emissions, price fixing. There's raw sewage dumped into the rivers by water companies. Nobody seems to care. There are low wages for workers, but mega pay packets for executives. What pleasure do executives get from condemning millions to poverty? We have nearly 16 million people living below the poverty line, 16 million households living below the poverty line. 21 million individuals in this country have an annual income, 21 million adults, I must say that is 42% of adults, have an annual income of less than £12,570. How do you get economic growth? Business can't boom. You can't sell your things even if you invest, because 42% of adults are already excluded. If you want to flourish as a business, you've got to have a more equitable distribution of income. People must have adequate purchasing power. There is insider trading. I'll come to that more in a moment. Auditors have no hesitation in falsifying documents. As we learned, KPMG falsified documents about Carillion audit and handed them to the Financial Reporting Council. I was one of the investigators for the Carillion collapse for the House of Commons Work and Pensions Committee. So I can't say more because there was lots of stuff I saw. Okay. Insolvency practitioners falsify information. Good evidence is from a company called Silent Night. Okay, recently. So there is no end to this. None of these things have happened by accident. People doing these things are not residing in some Dickensian den of thieves. They have offices in city centres. They drive smart cars, wear smart suits, live in leafy suburbs, but all these things are meticulously planned. We find them. Fines are puny. They don't really secure much change at all. And those businesses who are ethical and responsible, they also suffer because they get tainted with it too. And that is not good for economic development. It is not good for people's life. It is not good for people's future. So in 2016, I was advisor to the House of Commons Work and Pensions Committee for its investigation into the collapse of BHS. Well, I do these things over the years, investigate things, or get asked to investigate. So a subsequent report by the Financial Reporting Council on BHS's collapse noted that the PricewaterhouseCoopers audit partner was timetabled to spend only 2 hours on the audit, for 31 hours for consultancy. Yeah. For all practical purposes, the audit was under the control of a person with only 1 year's post-qualification experience. And within a day of me getting on this job, my conclusion was nobody's audited this, surely. This is, and I didn't even have inside information at that time. And as it turned out, it was just absolutely useless. And to appease the CEO of BHS, PwC audit partner also backdated the audit report. Okay. BHS said it had 2 non-executive directors. Quite often people say, oh, they will give us a different perspective. Who were they? One was a longtime friend of Sir Philip Green, legal advisor and chairman. Other person I had never ever heard of. I could not really find out. So when you can't find out these things, you go to social media to see whether somebody with that name turns up. And this person turned up, had his photo with his mother, and you soon discovered that he was a stepson of Sir Philip Green. And he was a non-executive director. And non-executive directors, we are supposed to told, will curb a fat cat tree, will regulate the executive directors. That's a joke. It was the same at Carillion. Non-executive directors were more interested in establishing benchmarks for their own pay than controlling what was happening at Carillion. So our corporate structures don't quite work as well. So at PwC, as I said, don't know what the norm is. And some things came to light as a result of BHS. Was that really the tip of an iceberg? Or was it the normal practice? Some years ago, I helped a public accounts committee at the House of Commons for its investigation into tax avoidance schemes marketed by big accounting firms. I was contacted by a former PwC partner who said, we never met, but I know what you do, and it's been troubling me, something we do, and I want to speak to you. Okay, I said, should I come to your office? Oh, no way. Should I meet you nearby? No way. Okay, where should we meet? Meet somewhere very crowded. Okay, where? How about St. Pancras Station? How on earth would I recognize you? Anyway, we exchanged some information, so I went. This person said within PwC, there was an unwritten rule that if a tax avoidance scheme had a 25% chance of withstanding a legal challenge, the firm would sell it. In other words, you know 75% chance that what you're doing is unlawful, but you still sell it. So I immediately took this person then to see the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, and the very opening session the next day, the chair repeated this fact. The other partners from the 3 accounting firms jumped in. No, we don't have such low standards. Our threshold is 50%. He said, oh my God, 50% chance what you're doing is unlawful, will kill people, deprive people of education, healthcare, pension, but you will just do it, okay? So, I mean, the audit industry could embrace greater transparency, but it has not taken any initiative. I have always said that audit reports should be accompanied by publication of the audit tender, audit contract. We need to be told what the composition of the audit team is, what the time budget is, what key questions they ask, what key replies do they receive, and why on earth are audit files a secret? That is, if you like, one answer to the conundrum of trust is transparency. And the response is, oh, well, we can't do that. Audit tenders are private. And I said, that's not true. People within your firm see it. Partner goes from firm A to firm B. They know what is in it. Your staff go from company A to company B. They know what is in it. Why on earth are you depriving anybody else? So I did get to look at some audit tenders. And the most common phrase was, we have a reputation for constructive accounting solutions. You can interpret that in any way you would like. On tax issues, well, what is this? Companies file accounts, and if you like, company law is really for decades redraws the boundaries on what is public, what is private. So companies file accounts. What is to prevent that law being extended to tax returns? Let us look at your tax return as well. In this era, we don't need masses of paper. Electronically, all the related correspondence could be filed. That might help HMRC, might also help rest of the people as well. And it is indeed very hard to think of a major UK company which is not avoiding UK taxes by shifting profits or using complex corporate structures. They're all at it, almost all at it. Okay, so transparency is important, but it is really being shunned. So what is really the malaise? The malaise is something like this, that increasing profits through tax avoidance, low wages, frauds, and shady practices has become part of what people call an enterprise culture. Okay, that persuades many to believe that bending the rules for personal gain is a sign of business acumen. We heard a bit about that in the first tax session today. Okay, stealing a march on a competitor at almost any price to gain financial advantage is now considered to be an entrepreneurial skill, especially where competitive pressures link promotion, status, profit, market shares, and niches with meeting business targets. With the average tenure of a chief executive at major quoted companies at 4 to 5 years, or maybe even less, the temptation is always to build high profit-related salaries, bonuses, and share options as quickly as possible. Those meeting or exceeding the targets become media stars, but they rarely face the music. By the time antisocial practices unravel, they are moved on to newer pastures. There is insatiable intoxication with personal accumulation of wealth, status, and power, often at the expense of others. There is no antidote for it other than education, regulation, retribution, punishment, transparency, public accountability, because business world is not going to cure itself of this intoxication, and which is something I will look. So we might look to regulators and governments to check antisocial practices, but they don't seem to be bothered. As I said, the flow of dirty money into the UK, and what I said about how easily you can form companies is a good example. The UK has over 700 regulators, would you believe? And at least 41 of them, maybe more, deal with the world of finance. There are 25 dealing with anti-money laundering. And it is hard to think about which one of them is actually effective. But there is no central enforcer of company law. It is all fragmented. Some bits go to the FCA, some bits go to the Financial Reporting Council, but large bits are just swept under the carpet. Okay. The audit industry has 5 regulators. Accounting firms have been doing audits for over 100 years, but they still can't deliver an honest or a robust audit. Okay. How long must we give them? Shouldn't we be looking for alternatives, alternative arrangements? Imagine if somebody's producing cars, but for 100 years producing cars which are faulty. How long would they actually survive? Auditors survive because it's a state-guaranteed market. You must buy the product whether you like it or not. And indeed, I spoke to, not far away from here, the chief executive of a company about this. I said, why do you keep hiring these firms who can't do a decent audit? He said, one must bury bodies, my dear boy. Okay. And in other words, there is a demand for dud audits. Otherwise, they would not really continue. So the parties affected by regulatory failures, whether they are pension scheme members, employees, others, they rarely have any representation on the seats of regulatory bodies. They are often colonized by people from the same industry. And it's not just individuals I'm interested in, it's the mindset. So I often talk about cognitive capture. There is cognitive capture. That is the real sort of a issue here. So our regulators are not that effective. Between 2017 and 2021, there have been just 2 successful convictions for insider trading, mainly because of what came out of the US. NatWest is the only bank ever convicted of money laundering because it volunteered to do so. Okay. Despite strong condemnations by the courts because of the cases brought by HMRC, no big accounting firm selling unlawful tax avoidance schemes has ever been investigated, fined, or prosecuted in the UK. But they are rewarded with government contracts. Okay, they got plenty of them for COVID and many other things. In 2018, the government launched the National Economic Crime Centre to tackle what it calls high-level fraud and money laundering. There's no case so far, not even one of them. Okay, the state has failed to tackle antisocial and corrupt practices because it has a cozy relationship with big business. In 1776, Adam Smith wrote, and I quote, "The English legislature has been peculiarly attentive to the interests of commerce and manufacturers," unquote. This was reworded by Marx and Engels in the Communist Manifesto in 1848 when they said, "The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie." There has never been a time in the UK when the state has not been captured by business or the rich elites. State has not been modernized. So little has changed. Today, the British state shields organizations who in writing admit that they have been engaged in criminal conduct. So let me just give you one example, which I have written about, cited in Parliament, and got zero response from government. In 2012, a US Senate committee documented HSBC's involvement in money laundering. The bank admitted in writing to the Department of Justice, quote, that it's been engaged in criminal conduct, and it was fined $1.9 billion and signed a deferred prosecution agreement. Remember, HSBC is a British registered bank subject to supervision by the regulators here. But there was absolutely no inquiry of any kind in the UK. So in the US, some of us and others wondered what on earth had happened. Eventually, the US House of Representatives Financial Services Committee also wondered, and they launched that investigation. Why no prosecution? And they published a report in 2016. That report included a letter from the Chancellor, George Osborne, along with correspondence from the Governor of the Bank of England and Financial Services Authority, urging the US authorities to go easy on HSBC because it was too big to fail and too big to jail. Okay? There was no ministerial statement then or ever since to explain this to Parliament. I confronted the minister with this on more than one occasion, and you simply find they just sit down and don't explain. Okay, so with the state and regulators covering up criminal conduct, there's little chance of restoring trust in big business, little chance of checking antisocial practices. Okay, and of course, people are highly skeptical. So that is just one example. 1991, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International was forcibly closed in the UK. To this day, there's been no investigation. It was the biggest banking fraud of 20th century. I've started doing some work on it, and with a US academic, we wandered into the US National Congress Library and found some documents of a report which had a code name, the Sandstorm Report. We did not know how complete the report was, but it told a particular story that the Bank of England governments were up to their neck in cover-up. Okay, so I then put in a Freedom of Information request. I would like to see this report because part of it is already sitting in the Congress Library. Oh no, I can't see this. Instead of taking 20 days, the government took 2 years to say, I can't have it. Well, okay, I'm afraid I'm not a lawyer, but I can learn law. So I said, I will appeal to the Information Commissioner. 2 years later, the Information Commissioner said, oh, I agree with the government. We said, just a minute, it's already sitting in the US Congress Library. No, we can't have it. So the only option then was left to the courts. So I went to the courts, represented myself. I'm not a lawyer, but I can figure out a few things. And altogether, it took 5.5 years. 3 judges unanimously ruled that this document must be released to me. I got it. It's on the internet. Many people have used that because at that time, the only £2,000 of your deposits were safe. Many people have seen that, they've gone back to the Bank of England and said, on this basis, we're going to sue you. They all got checks sent. I think last count was about £4.7 million worth of money just sent to them. Don't go to the courts. Okay, yeah. So you can see, what the government's been concealing. If you want, go to the internet, look at a document called Sandstorm Report, and you can read more about it. So National Crime Agency is pretty ineffective. It's been sent 10,000 pages of evidence to show that banks are forging customers' signatures to repossess their homes and assets. 3 years later, no action. Even worse, City of London Police Fraud Investigation Unit is now funded by Lloyds Bank. Why would they want to investigate when that kind of things happen? And the Thames Valley Police Crime Commissioner said, and I quote, I'm convinced the cover-up goes right to cabinet level and to the top of the city. This is a very senior law enforcement officer saying this. So again, problem. So secrecy is a key ingredient in corrupt practices, antisocial practices. UK ranks number 14 and number 13 out of 141 countries. It's not an open country, not an open society. And again, there is a problem with that. You can't restore confidence in big business without reforming the political system. Our political system is corrupt. Political parties available for hire to the highest bidder. Individual legislators can act as consultants. £10,000 you can pay and have dinner with a minister. What can the poor do? Nothing. Okay. So again, so just to quote you one donor, his name is Mohammed Amersi, who funded Boris Johnson's campaign to become Prime Minister. He said, for his money, you get access, you get invitations, you get privileged relationships if you're part of the setup. That's what's happening. Okay. Any surprise people are skeptical. So these donors get lucrative government contracts, public contracts. Oil and gas companies are making record profits at the moment, but getting record subsidies too. It just does not make any sense. There are plenty of think tanks funded by anonymous sources, including Institute of Economic Affairs, Taxpayers Alliance. Nobody knows who really funds them. They put out opinions as facts. They're on the inside track. And any challenger always has to provide evidence. Those on the inside don't. So people can see that the political system is corrupt and needs to be fundamentally reformed. But there is a little prospect of that at the moment. So finally, I would say, in order to restore trust in business, we need a big state. By big state, I don't mean a bigger state. We mean a big state which is big enough to stand up to organized interests and promote the interests of ordinary business and ordinary people, because that is where that is vital for our future. It must use a whole variety of tools, including transparency, accountability, investigation, democratization of corporations, and prison sentences for offending executives. That is exactly what the Environment Agency has called for water companies. They said fines just don't deter. They just become part of a business cost. So if you want to restore confidence, you got to go after the offenders, and that is what you got to do. And as they say, we are living in interesting times, possibly a change of government very soon. So let us see what happens. Thank you. I'm absolutely delighted that Lord Sikka could be with us. I know you've got a lot of parliamentary commitments and you've been extremely busy. The government and the discussions have kept you rather busy of late, but thank you for making the time. I will take one or two questions before we go to the next session. They've obviously accepted everything you had to say. We had interesting.
You recommended the big state. The examples that you mentioned, there seems to be so much interwoven connections. You said a solution would be a big state.
A big state, yes.
Yes.
Well,
but aren't we entrusting the cook with the?
I think you're right. There is no ultimately happy solution. We got to, the contradictions of capitalism are such that they can't easily be resolved. But we need constitutional reform. Our members of parliament earn 84,000 a year. That's enough. How many consultancies do they need? I would say none. Now, when we raise this in parliament, somebody says, yeah, but I'm a lawyer and I need to do this. I really benefit by talking to businesses. And my response is, I won't stop you. If you really benefit from talking to business, go ahead. If you think being a consultant helps, go ahead. But I will create a foundation for democracy, which will then receive all your consultancy fees. And we will then distribute that to parties in accordance with your share of the vote. Would you like that? And then they shy away. Okay. So basically, as long as there's private money, that means certain interests get privileged. Yeah. So we got to deal with that, and maybe the ultimate answer is one day the public funding of political parties. And if we paid less than £1 per person a year, that can be achieved. That is the price, which is not much. But I think you need to loosen this kind of a relationship between state and big business. Small businesses then have to join into this nuclear arms race because they feel if they miss out, if they don't go to political parties, conferences, don't hire these people as consultants, they're missing out. So this kind of a arms race escalates and is ultimately destructive.
Thank you. And I think it's quite interesting because, from the financial services sector and the first session we had, we've seen how far it can go. And we really are stepping back from the precipice in order to move back towards a position of trust, which we need to do because collectively we can't operate in the financial services sector if there isn't that fundamental trust. So I think that restoration of trust point is really valid. And I find it myself a strange anomaly. I mean, my own tax practice is very much around tax integrity now. And I find it odd that you could be, or, when we are pitching for work, that firms are willing to appoint a firm that has consistently engaged in tax abusive solutions, and the same firm is now offering tax integrity solutions whilst being sued at the same time. And yet we proceed with it. Anyway, thank you very much. That was a fantastic address. Fantastic.